Hello and welcome to another episode of the Smash Accept podcast. I'm your host, Michael Royer. You can find me on Twitter at DynastyDadFF. Joined as always, not quite FF Snoog, the man himself, FF Boot. Welcome to the show. You and I have been grinding on content, on drafts. I know you're 5-6 startups deep. And one thing you and I have really been noticing is the ability to be exploiting running back ADP and settings. You know, settings matter so much. I've always been the guy that talks about trades and talks about philosophy, and you've really started to be like, let's take a look at some other things. Let's take a look at settings. Let's take a look at war. Let's take a look at the way that we build our rosters. And I'm excited to chop it up and go over that with you here today.
Yeah, I'm fired up, man. Thanks for having me on. This is something, I believe we're going to do a 3 or 4 part series of just like startup mastery. And one of them is exploiting I thought the best one for us, and you kind of came up with it this morning, exploiting RB ADP, because we play, our smash leagues are all PPC leagues. So it's a little bit juice scoring to the running back. So I thought we couldn't come up with a better, more applicable way to start the startup series than talking about the most, I think, undervalued, position and the most valuable position to winning your leagues. And I'm super fired up. Like you said, I think I'm in my 8th startup this month. And I think next week we'll probably talk about, moving around in the draft, and, in the week after we can probably talk about punting versus going all in to try to win the championship in the beginning. But guys, there's nothing more valuable, in my opinion, Mike, than doing a startup the right way, getting your team, hammering, the right values, because that is the fundamental foundation of years to come. If you mess up the startup, whether you're punting or whether you're competing, I think it can really set you years back in Dynasty.
When it comes to startups and when it comes to our website, this guy's a straight up serial killer. So that's why we're going with the C4 serial killer. There's the link down below. Brandon's been the mastermind behind that. I mean, we've launched it. It's almost 3 weeks now, and guys are in there. 2,300 people have signed up. Make sure you guys check it out, smashacceptff.com. You go over there, use code LAUNCH, you get a free first month. I mean, there's nothing to lose there. Brandon's done a masterful job setting that up. Now let's talk about what we came here to do, and this is what's really exciting to me is in Dynasty. Now I've been playing it a lot longer than most of you guys. I've been playing it since 2013. It's my 13th year in Dynasty. And when I first started, it was the Mike Evans and the OBJs were rookies, and everybody's like, get those wide receivers early. And then Superflex became a lot more exciting. And then it's like, get those quarterbacks as soon as possible. And it's always been like, get the running backs as an afterthought. And I think the 2017 class really spoiled on us because they were here forever. Like you were like, oh, just wait on Alvin Kamara, wait on Joe Mixon, wait on Derrick Henry, wait on all those guys, because you're going to be able to get them later in drafts. Brandon, if you don't come away with a running back in your first 3 rounds, or 2 in your first 4, or 2 in your first 5, I think it sets you up for a massive gap here. We're going to talk about half PPR versus PPR and PPC, but even in general, just in a standard PPR league, if you're building it out and you don't get yourself a Bijan, you don't get yourself a Genti, you're really looking at the shorter window of running back expectations. Everyone talks about 2 to 3 year windows, and that's how we should be drafting anyways. But guys like Bijan and guys like Jahmyr Gibbs, it's not a 2 to 3 year window. They have the draft capital. They have the elite pedigree. They're going to be guys that play 6, 7, 8 years, injury pending.
Yeah, and that's really important. And we're going to talk about it in a second in something that I use a lot. And you guys have been following our shows, wins above replacement. And what you guys are going to learn after today, and if you haven't learned it already, is that it's much easier to replace a less scarce position such as wide receiver and get a more replaceable player in round 5, 6, 7, 8 than it is to get a replaceable running back, because the position's more scarce. There's only 32 starters as a running back in the NFL, and there's how many starters as wide receivers. I mean, if you go up to wide receiver 3, right, like there's 3 times 32, so there's a lot more replaceable players that it's easy to kind of mix and match that number to get it to look more like a top 2 or 3 round wide receiver. So I think that you got to really pay attention to that stuff, and we'll go through that in just a couple of minutes here, but I'm fired up about it.
Yeah, and what we look at here, and I had 103. This is Smash Accept 23 board on the back And shout out to those guys because it was a phenomenal draft. And I love drafting with you guys. And, we talked about a lot of you guys are like, oh, well, I want to join the website, but I still want to be a part of that community. I mean, it's guys like this, Uncle Piff, Notorious BMB, like they are part of that. The community didn't go away. The website comes with access to the Discord. You get all the tools, all the community. We've kind of blended the two perfectly. Now let's talk about this. I low key at the 103 was hoping and praying that Bijan or Gibbs fell to me because I have this thought process of at that 103, I'm like, give me one of those two guys. And at the 2-3 wrap, I'm going to get two quarterbacks because the quarterbacks are deep. The running backs are scarce. Unfortunately, or fortunately in this league, Josh Allen fell to me at 3, which I can't complain there. Josh Allen, I think, is still the 101 in every single format of Superflex. But when you're looking at this, there's been a major shift. I mean, Drake May, 22, 23 years old, coming off a MVP caliber year, and people are taking Jahmyr Gibbs over him. They're taking Bijan Robinson over them because they're starting to understand it. And especially in the format that we're talking about 0.25 PPC. And Brandon, he's the 102 currently on Dynasty Data Lab. In a full PPR, Bijan had 21.8 fantasy points per game. That's a difference maker. I mean, that's up over anybody other than Puka Nacua. But then when you take in the 0.25 PPC, 26.02 fantasy points per game, Brandon, that's a full 4 points above any wide receiver. And that's where you really got to look at that. Even at the quarterbacks, I understand the longevity. And a lot of you guys are going to argue back and forth of that. Brandon, when it comes to longevity, I mean, I know the old school frame of thought is, well, I got Drake May. I'm going to have him for 15 years. If you play Dynasty and you own a player for 15 years, you're not doing it right. You're not making trades. You're not doing what we do on our trade show where it's, play it like the stock market. Sell high, buy low. Maybe you and I were talking backstage. Maybe you own Drake May 3 times across his career. Yeah. But I'm never holding a guy that long. Like I have Bijan is my longest tenured player on any of my rosters, and I got him in 2023. At some point, I'll trade him. But at this point, he's been worth more than what he is, in the trade market.
And Mike, I think that you're starting to see Dynasty played a bit more like Redraft. Certainly when people are contending, and certainly in right out of startups where at the end of the day, like I hear this shit all the time, like, oh, I got the best wide receiver, he's going to be good for 8 years. At the end of the day, if you don't win any of those seasons, what the hell good was he on your team? I want to win. I'm not just doing Dynasty to stack. Like I see guys all the time. It's like a contest of how good and how young they are. But like, if that doesn't produce, you can have all the young wide receivers in the world that are 21 and Neighbors and all of these guys. But if they don't produce a championship, then what good was it? And I've done a study, and I'm going to come up with more content. I think I have a couple spreadsheets in here. Like I've done a study of like the top two teams and kind of the middle of the pack team. And you're going to notice that most of the teams that win their leagues are starting running backs in the flex. So not only do they have 2 starting top 10 running backs, Mike, they might have 4 of the top 18 starting running backs when they're competing, which means they only have 2 receivers and they're flexing 4 to 5 running backs when they're competing. So I just think that the game is being played a little bit differently. When I was in Dynasty, I was taught take the wide receiver that creates especially when you're not competing, take the wide receiver that guarantees you longevity and then go get running backs. But the problem is, Mike, when you're doing a 2 or 3 flex and you don't take any running backs in the startup, I don't care if you have 5/27 first, it's going to be hard to turn 5/27 first in a PPC league into 5 top 25 or top 20 running backs. So it's like, you really got to kind of, hum and hot together. Yeah. Do I have the magical formula? I don't know if I've figured that out. I think the balance, Mike, is how can you blend it so you're not strictly in redraft, but you're not strictly on the other end too. Is there a middle ground where you still have some value, but you're also ready to contend for 2 to 3 years to come?
I think I've perfected it. If you look at my first 4 picks in this, is I go at Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, then Jonathan Taylor, Kenneth Walker. And then you're talking Great about start. 2 guys that are going to be here because you have I ultimately wanted to get one of those other running backs. Like I wanted to go quarterback, running back, or get a wide receiver in there because you see guys like AJ Brown slip to fall round 6 and Terry McLaurin fall to round 8, and you're like, that's the new wave. And I think most of the Dynasty podcasts and YouTube channels out there that used to think the same way that I used to think if they haven't changed their thinking, they're dying and they're losing fans, they're losing people there because you're not winning people money. And if I want to say go quarterback, wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver, you just lost. You know, it's a good way to punt. You know, you can fill those running backs in through the draft, and that still becomes the cheapest way to do it. But you got to convert. I mean, when you see guys like this, where Jahmyr Gibbs, 104 in ADP, and I wholeheartedly agree. I'm taking him above Jamar Chase. I think I would really flirt with the idea of taking him above Drake May, because you look at that 21.4 in full PPR. And then 25.7 in PPC. And I know we've got to, these two guys are interchangeable. Some guys are going to say Gibbs. Some guys are going to say Bijan. What we really want to hammer through is this, you know, and this is something that Brandon, he's done multiple different shows on with Scott Connor, with guys from South Harmon, a lot of great names in here. Talk to me a little bit about, for people that are new to it, that just don't understand what is, because from a baseball perspective, I think that's where WAR really came out, where you were talking about how many wins above replacement does Ken Griffey Jr. get? And I remember seeing that, and you're like, wow, that is a really cool feature. But we've done that, and we've shifted it to fantasy football, right? Like in the early 2000s, people were playing fantasy football just blindly drafting players that they liked and trying to put it together. It's become a multi-billion-dollar industry where we're trying to figure out, how do we get more wins? Because that's ultimately what we're trying to do. And Brandon, talk to me a little bit about this graph that we're looking at half PPR versus PPR.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm going to try to break it down in a simplified way, you know, as far as wins above replacement. Wins above replacement basically essentially just means how many wins is each player in the positional value worth over the replacement level player of that position. So in a, let's just, you know, in a start, like 9 or start 10, the replacement level running backs is going to be somewhere between like 32 and 36, and wide receivers is going to be a little bit higher, probably 36 to 40. So we're looking at how many wins above that replacement level player is each of those positions. So guys, if you know nothing about what I'm talking about, all you have to do is use your eyeballs and read the chart, right? You can look at what, like by the size of the curve and what's the highest. You can tell very clearly in a half PPR, this is 6-point passing touchdowns. You can see that quarterback is by far the most valuable position in there. And not only that, but if you look at like the top, you really want a top 20 quarterback, because that's where it's really steep up there. Also running back. Look at how steep the running back curve. So how I read these charts, Dad, is like when I'm looking at the curve, I'm looking at where does it flatten out. If we look at the running back curve, that's pretty jagged, you know, up until somewhere probably in the mid 20s is where it starts to kind of flatten out. Look at wide receivers. That thing flattens at like 13. Where it's like there's not, and what that means is there's not much of a difference between wide receiver 13 and wide receiver 32. So to me, how I read that chart, and you can see PPR, that changes everything, right? Everything's closer together. There's, you know, it's not so much juiced towards running backs, and I think this might even be a 4-point passing touchdown instead of the 6-point. So you see how everything is congested? Well, here you can be a little bit more methodical. Is it make sense to take Jamar Chase over, you know, one of the quarterbacks or RBs? I wouldn't have a problem with that. But in a half PPR, it's not even with 6-point passing touchdown. I'm not touching wide receiver until sometime in the late rounds, just because I know that wide receiver 32 that I can get at round 6, round 7, round 8. I know that that's not a lot different than the wide receiver that I'm going to get in terms of scoring that I'm going to get in round 2 or round 3. Now maybe, Dad, am I going to lose in round 7, 8? Am I going to have to settle for a guy like Terry McLaurin or Mike Evans that, are they not 24 years old, like a Luther Burden or someone like that? Yeah. But are they going to produce, if I'm competing, are they going to produce similar numbers as far as points? Yes, they are. And then I'd rather go with the Christian McCaffrey, the Kenneth Walker, the John Taylor, the James Cook. I'd rather go with them in round 2 and 3 and give me that positional advantage when it's scarce than go with the wide receiver Tet or, you know, Pickens or any of those guys that are up in, you know, even Jefferson and those guys in that tier. That's kind of how I read this chart.
Yeah. And this is, guys, wholeheartedly, if you play half PPR, massive swing, you know, and that's something that we've been talking about. A lot of you guys don't pay attention to that. You just look at someone's blind rankings, and on our website, when you go into our calculator, when you go into our rankings, you can base this off of that. You can go in your calculator and set it for half PPR, full PPR, 0.25 PPC, 10 team, 12 team, 14. It all matters. It's not a cookie cutter where you go on a certain website and you say, oh, these are the dynasty rankings. They're not all the same. And I think being able to look at this from multiple different lenses makes it a lot more important. Looking over here at our PPC versus PPR, I mean, it even jumps up even further. You could see that chart blows up like crazy and kind of differentiates even more. And when we talk about guys like Ashton Genty, right? And this is where we get into the part of the draft where Ashton Genty goes at the 201 right now. So at the 201, we're debating with him and we're neighbors and Amon-Ra and kind of going that way. I think his value has really gotten up there to a crazy status. However, you look at what the difference is. You see that 14.0 or 14.4 fantasy points per game last year. There's no way he doesn't break out and make that more like 17, 18 this year. But he put up 18 fantasy points in 0.25 PPC, like 17.9. That would have been good enough last year, Brandon, to be the wide receiver 5, only behind Puka, JSN, Amon-Ra, and Chase. Settings matter. Now, am I telling you that I prefer Ashton Genty over Amon-Ra or Bowers or Neighbors? Depends on your context, right? But he absolutely is deserving in that same area. I think he has the same kind of trajectory where you see a year 2, 25% increase. We get him up to 17 or 18. That takes that 0.25 up to 20, 21 points. If he gets it up to 22, he outscores literally everybody but JSN and Puka. So you can argue about the longevity. You can say that wide receivers matter more. But how long is Ashton Genty going to be in the league? Like 2030, you're still going to see him in the league. And I think that's what a lot of you guys get caught up on. Well, Malik Neighbors is going to be in the league a lot longer. We don't know that with the knee injuries and things like that. Well, Amon-Ra 26 is going to be there the same amount of time as Genty. We don't know that. Like the curve is there. When you can get running backs like this and you can literally dominate your draft later and get it set up, I'm all in on running backs, especially in the settings.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you there. I mean, if you really, we say all the time, like, hey, we play Dynasty in 3-year windows, but like, then why are we drafting guys that we're playing a 6 or 8 or 10-year window, right? Ashton Genty, if we're really truly playing in a 3-year window, like I would, why isn't Genty right behind Bijan? Right? Like why isn't with his projections and his line sucked and he's got a new offense, he's got a new coach and new quarterback and all of these things. Like, why is Genty? I mean, I could argue, I'm looking at a draft in the background right now. Genty went at the 108 in a PPC league. I could easily argue Genty right behind Drake May at 106, 105, 107, wherever you want to slice it. I don't think there's a quarterback in a PPC league. I don't think there's a quarterback that should go over Genty. I think that he's much more valuable than anything that you're getting there for a 3-year window. Right. And that's the kind of risk that I'm taking. And let's be honest, guys, like Dynasty is risk. We're calculating what risk to take, and how that's going to play off in the next 2-3 years, minus the variance of injury. I think Genty in this league setting, when you guys just saw the chart, I think Genty is a very, very good risk to take at the early, or the mid first in this format.
Last year, Superflex leagues, you were getting 8 quarterbacks. You were getting 8 quarterbacks and 2 running backs and, 1 or 2 from another potential wide receiver. This year, as I'm starting to look at it, and Genty went 107 in Smash except 23. Shout out to Ken Kniff, great guy there. But I mean, we're looking at this as like 3 running backs went round 1, 5 quarterbacks, 3 wide receivers, and then we mix in, and then we have the tight end, obviously. But like, we're looking at this from a different lens of being able to play in that 3-year window and have that where I understand what you're saying. I mean, do I prefer Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels over Ashton Genty? Absolutely. If your quarterback league has 0.25 PPC for the quarterbacks as well, Jaden Daniels and Lamar Jackson. And for you guys that don't, 0.25 PPCs, you just get a point. You get 25, 0.25 for every carry. So every 4 carries, you're getting an extra point. You look at guys, I mean, that's 4, 5, 6 points extra a game. We're looking at some average points there, but these guys are scoring crazy points. Like when you start to look at some of the guys that get absolutely insane volume, another guy that is on that trajectory that Brandon and I absolutely love, and a guy that I was drafting everywhere last year, wherever I could get him in rounds 4 and 5 and even 6. Now he's a staple. He's going at that 208. Brandon, the difference there is he had 15.8 fantasy points per game, which was just, a full point above Genty, but 18.5 in PPC. Like, this is a guy now that gets that Mike McDaniel offense, that's going to get more receptions, that's going to get more carries. I mean, this guy's fantasy point projective, I guarantee in PPC, he is going over 20 fantasy points per game this year. Like, this is someone that's going to absolutely eat. I guess my question for you then is, like, how much should we be paying up for these guys? Like, a lot of people ask me, so in round 6, you got your, like running backs in round 6, you're looking like Breece Hall, Bucky Irving, Kyron Williams. Should I be adding a 27 first to get up to those guys based on the longevity? Because Amarion Hampton is 22, while Kyron is 26, turning 27. Do you pay up for those kind of guys? Like, is that something that you've done a ton of startups? I mean, you've used your 27 first. We have said at Smash Accept that the hype of the 2027 first has gone so far that, like, you should trade it in a startup. Like, if you're trying to move in and you want to contend. So talk to me a little bit about trading your startups and how you move up to get some of these guys, because the longevity of these guys does matter. Like, the difference between drafting Derrick Henry versus Amarion Hampton is massive.
Yeah. Can I put up a slide, Dad? Is that possible to add something? Yeah, let me just share this with you guys. All right, check this out. Can everyone see this? So every draft is different, Dad. And I think, we should have probably said this in the beginning. I try to have somewhat of a plan going into my drafts based on the league settings, based on my league mates. Like, I obviously we draft in a lot of the same, waters, and we know a lot of the same people. So I'm trying to understand where running back's going to go, where our, quarterback's going to go. I know I can pretty much get receivers. So I'm really playing a game of where do I get my running backs and where do I get my quarterbacks when I'm competing. When you're punting, we'll talk about that in another show. But you can see in this format, what I was trying to play with, I was like, how many firsts can I get? And then I'll figure it out from there. So I ended up being able to get Genty right at the 108. I ended up getting Josh Allen. And then, Dad, I traded up from, I can't remember. I think I had a third. I traded my 27 first, and I went up and got Amarion Hampton at the 2-2 here. And I think you've got to be careful when trading future picks. You better damn make sure that you're going to be competing and you're putting that team together. I've done enough of these, Dad, where I know that if I trade my 27 first, I usually don't trade my 28. I think that's leveraging too much. If injuries happen and you land on a couple landmines, I think that can go really poorly for you. So I try not to trade my 28. But if I'm doing my 27 first, I'm making sure that I have some type of layout where it's like, if I'm dominant, I know that, Dad, if I am dominant in my quarterbacks and my running back position when I leave the draft, I know I can hum and ha the wide receiver and tight end position together, where I'm going to at least give myself a chance to win a championship and be a top 3 type of pick. And that's all you can do, guys, is, coming out of a startup, it's really difficult. And Dad, you correct me if I'm wrong, to create a juggernaut, imbalanced team, in out of a startup. Everyone's starting with the same, the same chips, the same value. What you do with that can create value, but it's much more likely 2-3 years in that you have that surplus where you can really create, a distorted value. But out of a startup, it's tough. Like, the likelihood of you running away with it out of a startup, I just don't think it's high. You're just giving yourself, are you top 3, giving yourself a chance? And that's what I feel like I've done here with.
All right. So where we were going with that, we were talking about making sure we're moving around. We're getting our ADP, getting the guys that we want. The next stop we're talking about is looking at your top 75 scoring by league format. And when you look at things, you look at your top 25 players last year, you had 13 quarterbacks, 6 running backs, 5 wide receivers, and 1 tight end. But then when you move down to your top 50, each time down, you're starting to look at things really level off. When you get to PPC, it's crazy difference, where out of your top 25, it goes from 6 of your top 25 all the way up to 9. And this kind of format, I love seeing these kind of things. I love being able to look at this, because the one thing that stands out to me that all of our listeners ask about, that everybody's like gets their panties in a bunch about, is, well, it's tight end premium. Well, guys, take a look at this. That there was one guy in your top 25 last year in tight end premium? 1. That was Trey McBride. And if you got to 2 tight end premium, because 0.5, let's just be honest, that's just vanilla. That's nothing crazy. 0.75, we're starting to get a little bit better. 2.0, okay, now it's you had 2 guys in the top 25, but I see people taking Brock Bowers at the 105. I see people taking Trey McBride at the 112. I see people taking Colson Loveland at the 205. I see them, just reaching on that. The studs get their points, but then I see people like, well, I decided that I really wanted Howard Fannin, so I drafted him over Jonathan Taylor because it's tight end premium. Ouch. That is not what we're here to do. That's not what we're trying to show you, because you see the difference there. Even when you get into the top 50, the wins above replacement, I mean, you're not getting that same kind of value. So, Brandon, talk to me a little bit about what this graphic here. It's good to have you back. Let's talk to me a little bit about this graphic here and what you see off of this and what our listeners should be jumping in on.
First of all, I just want to say that, I am not opposed to taking a hammer at tight end, right? I think tight end, if you can get Bowers, I maybe even put Loveland in that category this year when everything's said and done. Obviously, McBride, if you can get one of those hammers, it does create a positional advantage that is a huge gap, because when you look at the curve, it's so flat down here that it really does get you an advantage. I have a hard time taking that positional advantage over the advantage at running back in the leagues that we play in that are points per carry leagues. So it's, I'm not saying that it's a terrible move, but I think that it's better to go get Bowers or one of those guys after you already have created all of this value in your team, especially if you're doing a 1-year punt. It's easier to get him there than take him here instead of Ashton Genty, instead of even a Jamar Chase or one of those guys. But basically, I created this sheet for myself when I started drafting a couple months ago, and I was like, I just want to be able to see it when I'm in a PPC league. I want to see I just wonder how many tight ends are in the top 25? How many, quarterbacks are in there? And you guys can see it, the FPTS is basically just like a normal PPR league. Look at that, Dad. Look at the PPC versus, the top 25, just PPR. You've got
look at what the wide receivers do.
Backs. 9 running
going from
backs
5 to 2. It's crazy.
9. And look at it, it gets even worse at the top 50. You've got 20 to 16 or 20 to 12 or 20 to 6, PPC, and then 16 to 12. I mean, it's such a discrepancy there. There's 20 versus 6. There's only 6 wide receivers that are in the top 50. Think about that. That's like the first 4 rounds. There's only 6 receivers. I'll tell you, in a startup, Dad, a lot more people are drafting wide receivers, in the top 4 rounds than 6. So every time someone does that, the good news, guys, they push a running back, they push a quarterback back to a position that they're basically wasting a spot. So you can grab a higher, a guy that's higher in that war chart. And I love that. That's what most people aren't educated on that. So it's nice to see visually versus just us talking about the concepts.
Now let's talk about round 3 and 4 here, because this is where you add the GOATs, and I know everybody's worried about it. I look at this. I mean, like Christian McCaffrey, what goes at 402. There is no one that scores more fantasy points than Christian McCaffrey. Like Josh Allen in your 6-point passing and in 0.25 PPC. Anybody else, it's Christian McCaffrey's there. You look at where he's at right now, 402. Last year, 24.5 fantasy points per game. Boot, 29 in 0.25 PPC. Like, that is absolutely insane. And I know everyone gets worried about the age part. This is where, if you're going to do this, right, in my particular draft, and you see Josh Allen goes 1, Herbert in the 2nd round. Then you got guys like Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey in this range. And then you're like, okay, if something falls apart with Christian McCaffrey, I can sell Josh Allen for Justin Herbert, a 27 first, plus another running back, or a Trevor Lawrence, or I can tear down. If I go running back, I mean, those guys in the beginning, you've got to make sure you have insulated value. But rounds 3 and 4, and I know in Dynasty's always been like, oh, that's where I get my next Emeka Ibuka. That's where I get my next. And I love Mekhi Lemon. You see him go there, right there in that same range. who's going to score you more points in the next 2 years? If you're playing in a 3-year window, Christian McCaffrey is going to be the RB1 or 2 probably this year and next year. Makai Lemon's a great asset to own. And this is where Dynasty's so cool, right? Like, because in redraft, we all just want to win. That guy that's drafting Makai Lemon, he don't want to win this year, and then that's fine. If you want to win, guys like Christian McCaffrey, guys like Jonathan Taylor. I mean, you look at this, Jonathan Taylor in the third, who I happen to take in this particular draft, 21.3 fantasy points per game, 26 in 0.25 PPC. Like, he had 311 carries last year, or 321, led the entire NFL. McCaffrey had 311. That's insane. Like, if you look at that, that is literally an extra touchdown per game in fantasy points per game, because you get 24 carries per game. That's a touchdown. You just get 6 extra points. That's bonkers. You just can't have that in any other format. And I get it. You're going to say, well, the longevity, and they're not going to last as long. But if you're, like Boot said, if you're playing in that 2 to 3 year window and you build your roster the right way, these are guys that can literally win your leagues. And Brandon put this together here of a chart that shows what you get in PPR versus PPC and what the values are. And talk to me a little bit about what you see once you pulled up this particular graphic.
Yeah. So I just want to, touch on one of your points from before. That's why you're getting Christian McCaffrey in the 3rd and 4th round. If he was 24 years old, he'd be the 101, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you're still getting a value. And at the end of the day, Dad, I don't think we're talking about this enough. Like, you guys have seen like what Claude and technology has done with what we're able to do and how we're able to build things. Like, guys, don't you think that those same technologies are available to these football players of keeping their bodies healthy longer? I mean, Derrick Henry is a perfect example.
Mm-hmm.
I heard 5 years ago that he's dropping off. He hasn't dropped off yet. He's still 33 now? 34? Is he going on 34? Like, what's to say? Who's to say that Christian McCaffrey, one of the best running backs, a professional athlete that is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, who's to say that he can't keep his body in shape enough to have another 350 yard plus or 350 point plus seasons? If he does that, you said, he's probably going to outscore Makai Lemon. He might outscore Makai Lemon his entire career the next 3 years. So to me, I still think, you've got to have the build to do it. You have to have the balls to do it, because yes, you are right. There is no insulation if something happens to McCaffrey, that if Genty or Gibbs or any of those guys go down, there's the insulation there. You're going to be okay. But that's why you're giving a 102 for Gibbs, for that insulation. McCaffrey's kind of like, hey, we're going all in and let's hope it works out. And I got to tell you, Dad, when he drops to the late 3rd, late 4th, that there's no one that I'm more excited about clicking the button for Christian McCaffrey in even a PPR league. I'm fine with that. But back to this league, you can really, or back to this other chart, Dad. Do you want to go back to this just so we can talk about this really quickly? Back to this. I mean, you can really see it here. If we're on a PPC, like, just look at the 10th person last year. You've got Travis Etienne at 318. Just go to PPR and look at like number 10. That's 100, almost 100 points different. Look at the PPC wide receiver stuff. Like, you're talking about 10 versus 10. You're giving up 100 points, Dad, for a wide receiver in the same range as the running back. And a lot of those guys, they'll go right next to each other in a draft, but this guy's going to outscore the other guy in a more scarce position, which it's more valuable, by 100 points. So I just can't justify taking the receiver over the running back in rounds, 2 through 4.5. I can't justify it.
Yeah, I mean, let's play a quick game there with that, because I like that. I like what you're saying there. Let's take a look at these guys. I mean, you have your choice between, it's right now, I mean, from our last draft, it was Amarion Hampton or Drake London.
It's Hampton by a mile.
In PPC,
and I love London. I love London.
I do too. But like, it's Garrett Wilson or Jonathan Taylor. Garrett Wilson's phenomenal. Snoop took Garrett Wilson to pick before me when I took Jonathan Taylor, so I'm not gonna knock my boy there. But you have Emeka Ibuka or Devon A-Chain.
It's like Ferrari or Honda.
And then we had Christian McCaffrey or Harold Fanning. This is what we had on the last one. There's no wide receivers in that area. It was Chase Brown or Zay Flowers, Jadarian Price or Rome Odunze. And I know there's risk with Jadarian Price, but when we're talking about guys like this, where Jonathan Taylor, and the reason that I prefer Jonathan Taylor over Garrett Wilson now in Dynasty is, dude, the guy put up 26 points per game in PPC or 21 in full PPR. Garrett has never come close to that. He has not sniffed those numbers. And I understand there's the logic of that longevity, but what Boot and I are trying to tell you is that a false thing? The idea of longevity. If I go to trade, what has more market value right now? It's 27 firsts, quarterbacks, running backs. You could buy wide receivers. You go out there and you try to buy a wide receiver, you're going to get one. There's no problem. You go buy a Cortland Sutton, a Terry McLaurin, a Mike Evans. You're going to buy something and it's going to be able to give you solid production. That's the difference between Dynasty and Redraft is in Dynasty, we don't have those running backs. You see in this particular draft, Derrick Henry went in round 6. Josh Jacobs went in round 6. Round 7 through 10, you don't have a running back you can draft that is going to give you guaranteed production. You're betting on them being the next guy. But round 7 through 10 with wide receivers, you still have those guys that are going to give you points. You still have the Jalen Waddles and the DJ Moores, and those guys are going to score points. Round 7 through 10, we're talking David Montgomery, RJ Harvey, Jonathan Brooks, Blake Corum. There's no guarantees there. So if you're playing in that 2 to 3 year window, it just doesn't make any sense.
And Dad, let me ask you a question. Even when you're on the clock and you're picking between a guy like John Taylor or Garrett Wilson, if you're a champion, if you're on a championship roster, who are you paying more for right now? Right? Are you gonna pay more, Dad? Are you to get you're a contender? Are you giving up more for John Taylor on a contender or Garrett Wilson?
I'm paying more for Jonathan Taylor. What I love about that, and I'm going to throw the next guy's graphic up here too, because I feel like I'd be remiss to not have him in that same category because those are the guys. And what I love about what we have on the website there, guys, again, smashacceptff.com. Make sure you check that out. Also, hit that subscribe button for YouTube. We're on a quest for 20K. Brandon, we're about to hit, we're 5 away from 12K. Last week, we just hit 11, so it's been 1,000 a week, which has been crazy. So hit that subscribe button if you like this kind of content. But I'm paying up for James Cook's and Jonathan Taylor's. And on the website, you can see your roster percentage. My number 1 across all my leagues is Josh Allen. My number 2 across all my leagues is James Cook. And they dominated. And it's not just because I got a Josh Allen jersey behind me. A.J. Brown's my number 3. Those are guys that you're they're going to score you points no matter what. And people start to get that age worry in their head. And Garrett Wilson has not come to fruition, but Jonathan Taylor's produced year after year after year and has put up those points. What's great about Dynasty is I am going after the teams that have this worry. We're talking about ADP and startups right now, but I've gone through, and again, you can do this on our website, go on Trade Finder, and I've gone through before the show even started, and everybody that had Jonathan Taylor, I offered my late 27 first just to see what was going on. And it started some dialogue because people have this fear and this worry about losing their running back. We've all had a guy that like Joe Mixon. Now, he went several years past what we were expecting, but that guy that just he doesn't fade out. He just disappears. And that's the risk that you play. But like James Cook, Jonathan Taylor, they're going to be in the league at least another 2 years where they're going to give you at least RB2 production, where I think, and that's on the light side. I think those guys are going to continue to put up points, but that's where I'm at on that, and I'm glad you asked that because I'm paying up for running backs more than I pay up for wide receivers.
Yeah.
If I'm in a rebuild, I want to build completely around wide receivers in that case, but we're talking about running backs. And that's why I put together rosters like this. Look at this thing on the side. Bijan, Gibbs, James Cook, Omarion Hampton. It's 0.25 PPC. And this is one of my favorite ones. We're going to do an entire show on building a true dynasty because this thing started out as a rebuild. I feel bad for your league mates
with that roster.
Dude, I've lost the ship 3 years in a row. But we've gotten to a point where I've just had an embarrassment. I traded Hendo and Tet to get JSN just to get another piece in there. But I drafted these guys in 2023. I did a punt in 2022. I took Bijan, I took Gibbs, and I started just putting these players together. And I know you do this in a similar format. We're not just throwing this out there. We are building rosters where these running backs are going to dominate. And then every year when the season's over, then you start to evaluate, right? So now you're like, after the season's over, I'm like, do I want to trade James Cook to the next guy? Do I want to move him? You know, because you see the bench over there with Kyron and Rashi and all these other guys on there. But I'm not saying you could build like one like this easily. Wow. But you start to every year, right? Like at the end of the year, you start to think, what can I do to make this team better? Is now the time I trade James Cook for a 27 first and get a Jonathan Brooks on this particular roster? It's not about just owning the running backs. It's about proper roster management with those running backs. We're not saying draft Christian McCaffrey in the 4th round, which is and then try to hold him for 3 years. We're saying you draft Christian McCaffrey, you win the damn championship, and then you decide, am I going for another one? Because if I'm going for another one, I'm keeping him. But if I'm not, I'm flipping him.
Yeah, Dad, and that's so important. It's just back to the rule. It's like, you know, are we here just assembling the best roster, or are we here trying to win? Right? If you can roll 2 championships back to back, I mean, what do you in a 12-team league? You're supposed to win 1 every 12 years. If you can roll 2 back to back, Dad, and you have to grind McCaffrey, people are like, well, I'm not getting enough value back. Well, you got the value of winning the league, which is the whole point of why you did fantasy. I mean, in the beginning, Dad, I got so focused on rebuilding because it was so much fun, and I kept that like not. Yeah, it's fun. And it's like you get stuck in this. Oh, dude, I got the best rebuilding team, and then you forget, like, holy shit, wait, I haven't won any chips. I'm just giving my $200 buy-in, and I'm not getting anything in return. If you have a chance to run it back after you win one, and you've got McCaffrey, you win this year, and you've got him next year. Now you have a decision. Can I really run it back? You could go to our 1,000 team trade simulator and see like what percentage, if you keep Christian McCaffrey, are you going to be able to run it back and give you a championship, you know, again this year? Or you can sell him and still maybe get a late 27 first because he balls out again. But at least it gives you options, Dad. And you know, that's what I love most about having these elite level running backs. And who's to say that he's not going to have another 2 to 3 seasons?
Yeah, and what I Snook's watching this from work. This cracks me up.
Go.
Snook can't get off work. But hey, what I really like about this entire thing, and what I like about this show, and having a different perspective and talking with Brandon is so many of you guys get into that cookie cutter of like, I want those extra 27 firsts. And I did smash accept 21, and everybody saw that I got 10 27 firsts, and you're like, dang, that's sexy, right? I'm giving up my buy-in for this year. I mean, I'm not going to win a red cent, you know, like I'm giving it up, and no matter what that is. Now next year I got a decent chance, and I love being able to punt. What's really been interesting is doing draft after draft after draft. You can't keep doing the same thing, and you have a plan going in, but you got to zig when they zag. And if everybody's punting, give me some money. I'm gonna go win it. And you had a great point there where it's like, if I win year 1 and year 2, I pay for the next 24 years, you know, like, or at least the next 10 years, you know, you kind of get into that area. And so many people lose sight of that. They start talking about building sexy rosters. And there's a lot of great shows that I listened to along the way in the beginning where it was like, let's build that sexy roster, you know, and you have a whole team of 9 elite, sexy looking wide receivers. And then you get a couple old crusty wide receiver running backs in there. And it's like, we want to build this thing out where you're either winning now or you're losing as bad as possible. We talk about a top 3, bottom 3 mentality here. We're always trying to do those things where we don't want a roster where you're looking at it and you're like, okay, I'm okay. I'm somewhere in the middle. Everything's top 3 or bottom 3. If you guys want to be a part of that, hit that subscribe button. It's right here. We've been doing shows like, you know, bringing you a 2027 equivalents where you can understand what player values are worth and what those guys are and how you can buy certain players. We have shows where we've been bringing you guys, and this is one of my favorite ones, up over 130,000 views, but rebuild players to buy. You know, when we're rebuilding, we're not buying running backs. We're buying wide receivers. We're buying quarterbacks. We're buying guys into that frame. And one more show that I think really hasn't gotten enough love, but I think is one that's been really phenomenal is you can't buy 27 first. But you can get those 28s. Like every single guy out there is like, oh man, I'm not able to get any 27s in my draft. And Brandon, you've done a bunch of them. The 28s flow like the wine at Capistrano or whatever from the Dumb and Dumber. Like, dude, this you just like, yeah, I'll take it. Don't just give me a pick.
And the truth is, Dad, and I think we talked about this the other day, like on Trade Show Tuesday. I think there's a chance with NIL, there's a chance that the 27 hype actually flows into 28 if some of those Arch Manning and some of those big guys pull out. And they could, if they get a $10 million payday, why wouldn't they go back to school? And you're seeing that more and more and more. So guys, there's a chance that 27 is just good and 28 was the crown jewel and is the crown jewel. And all of those 28s that you got way back in the day that people were just gifting you in startups because they thought that 27 was the real crown jewel. Now you're able to cash in, and someone traded their 28 and now it's the 102 dad. That's how you change your dynasty team when you're doing, and we'll talk about this next week, when you're doing a rebuild. All it takes is someone to have a couple injuries that they weren't expecting, a couple things happen, a guy, career ending, or he gets traded or something happens. And now all of a sudden his 28 team is bogus and you land two top 28 firsts. It's going to be hard to compete.
Understanding it ahead of time, that roster that I showed you there. I mean, I traded Michael Penix Jr. and James Conner for a random 2024 first, right? Or 2025 first, 2 years before. So people don't think about that. That became Omarion Hampton because that guy's team dismantled. And it's like, that's
look
how
at
you
both those
win
guys
in Dynasty. It's like RIP. But guys, thanks. This has been a fun show. We're super excited about everything that's been going on at Smash Accept. The website's there, smashacceptff.com. You have until July 16th to go over there and get a free month. Check it out on us. Code launch will get you in there. We're super excited to keep just rolling out more. I mean, Brandon, like I said, I was putting this out there. My man's a straight up serial killer. He's out there grinding behind, taking care of business. So it's been fun having you on here. Snoog's watching from work. So we got to thank you guys all for tuning in and enjoy the process.
Let's go.
Got a bell for